everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I cannot believe that we are here with the 12th episode of the Dyepot PS series. The Patreon started about a year ago, and here we are, and I have to say that I love doing these videos so much. This month, I am going to play with the colors black and gray. And I'm going to do this in a few different techniques and on a few different yarn bases. Right here I have just 5 different yarn bases from KnitPicks laid out, and as I get to the dyeing I will talk a little bit more about each of them as they come up. As always, there will be affiliate links for all of the yarn bases and equipment that I use in the video description. Before we can get started, I need to go and pre-soak these yarns. I plan to pre-soak everything at room temperature in plain tap water for a minimum of 30 minutes before we get to the yarn dyeing. The 3 colors I am planning to primarily use in this video are Dharma True Black, Toner Black, and Silver Gray. I know that some of these might break when speckling, which means that they are made up of a bunch of different dye particles, but I'm not sure if they necessarily break with dip dyeing. So we're going to start off with speckling with all 3 of these colors on one skein of yarn and sort of see what happens. Let's start with some gray and black speckles. Right here I have some KnitPicks Rustic Wool fingering weight yarn. This is 100% superwash wool. It's a beautiful single ply yarn, and I have never tried dyeing it. In this dedicated dye pot I have 4 cups of water, 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and our 100 grams of yarn. Whenever I am going into the dry powders, I will be wearing a respirator and safety glasses. And all the equipment that I'm using here is dedicated dye equipment and not used for food. I am going to be speckling directly from the dye containers with my fingers. I'm not pre-mixing with citric acid. And so I will be washing and drying my hands in between each color. Let's start with the silver gray. I've used all 3 of these colors together once before. I mixed them when I was just doing some color swatching to try to get a sense of the different colors. And you can see where I'm hitting the water, or the yarn first versus the water. I am getting some more sharp speckles, but I've never dyed this particular yarn before. So I am really excited to see how it's going to come out. Alright, so far I don't see any breaking with the silver gray. The speckles look like a really deep charcoal color. I'm not sure if they will feel black when dry though. When you wash and dry your gloves, then you can reuse the same ones. This is true black. Whoa, it looks dark. Whoa. Okay, maybe I grabbed a bit too much. That went in pretty heavy. I just have the tiniest bit now on my fingers, and I'm rubbing my fingers together to deposit this onto the yarn. So I would say that this is incredibly pigmented, and there is definitely a difference in the color here. I think that, oh, that's bleeding out a bit, that's okay. There's a bit extra on my fingers I just want to rub off. I went a little heavy here, and I am okay with that. I think that, like, in some of these areas, I'm definitely seeing some really sharp speckles where the water level is lower. And again, I'm not seeing any breaking with the true black. I think that if I wanted to really make sure I was getting really sharp speckles, I should use maybe only 2 cups of water. But I just want to give a zoom in on the true black. For using what felt like similar amounts of dye, you can see just how much more pigment there is in here from this black, and we've got these beautiful, beautiful black speckles. Zoomed in on the silver gray, you know, the speckles are way more spread out, and I think that's just because I'm not sure if there's filler in these dyes, so that way, you know, when you make a 1% stock solution of the gray and the black, you can treat it maybe a little similarly, but I think that, you know, these are more spread out. The color is a hair lighter in those speckles. I'm not, like, these, the true black definitely feel more black. These feel more like charcoal. But if I was to mix them all over the yarn, it could be hard to tell which one is which. Finally, we are going to use the toner black. And then I believe that this one is going to break. Because I saw it break before, but I was there just adding like large amounts of the dye versus just sort of tiny dispersed spots. And the dye itself looks a bit more reddish with the toner black. Whoop, there's a big spot. I'm not noticing. Aha, I'm seeing some red spots in there. They are subtle, and I probably don't need to add a lot more right now. I'm just trying to see if we can see more of this breaking. I'll wash my hands and be right back. Oh, wow. There are not very many red speckles, but you can definitely see one here, and there's one in there as well. I am going to be really interested to look at this whole yarn once it's dry, because I am curious if I'm going to observe a difference between the silver gray speckles, the true black, and the toner black. But right now, I would say that you definitely want to use the true black for speckling if you don't want to end up with some hints of red. But I'm going to now let this sit for 5 minutes, and then we're going to flip the yarn over. There is no doubt in my mind that these colors have set, and I am going to pick this up and flip it over. Ooh, I'm actually kind of impressed by this color penetration that we got. Clearly we got some sharp speckles, but we also got some of this color to like spread out nicely. And I am digging it. Let's sort of shake it to spread things out. I think as like this project goes on, maybe let's shift that down there. I think as this project goes on, it's going to be a little harder to tell the difference between the toner black, the silver gray, and the true black, but I will do my best, and we are going to add some speckles to this side. However, I am going to do that off camera, and I will come back once the speckles are all on here. 10 minutes are up, and our water level is real low here now, but just for, ooh, there's some real dark patches and patches with less speckles, patches with more speckles. And now that I'm moving it around, I'm not even sure if I am going to be able to tell where the grays are, with the exception of the help from some of these red marks from the toner black. Nevertheless, I think that this is a really, really fun yarn. And all right, I am going to turn off the heat here, set this aside to cool so we can wash it. In this pot I have 12 cups of water, and there's no vinegar yet, but let's go ahead and add just 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. So it's a bit acidic. My tap water is a bit acidic in general, but we'll start there. And now that we know that the toner black is the one that has some other pigments in it, let's try dip dyeing some yarn into some toner black.
Okay, I'm not going to do things by weight today. I have the toner black here, and I'm going to measure out 1/2, approximately, 1/2 teaspoon of the dye. It is definitely more accurate to go with weight than volume, but let's just try volume based today. I just went over to the sink and added a tiny bit of water here, so that way I could try to dissolve it. I actually turned off the heat on the dye pot, so that way I could try to dissolve our dye in here. Warm water is a little easier, and you know, I'm not making a dye stock, so this way I can clear out our plastic cup in here, and that's actually working rather well. This is feeling like a lot of dye right now, and I'm not necessarily expecting to see it break, but I am curious.
Now I'm going to heat this up so that way we can dip dye. The yarn that I'm planning to dip dye in maybe isn't the best to see breaking, but I'm going to be paying attention to the color of the water, so that way I know if I want to try this again with some of the breaking conditions that I use on food coloring a lot. Let's start dip dyeing our yarn. The yarn that I'm using right now, is KnitPicks Galileo. This yarn is 50% merino wool, 50% viscose from bamboo. And right now, I honestly don't remember if it is superwash or not. There is a lot of color in here. I am not sure. I'm gonna have to slow down. This might be too much to see if we'll see any breaking. One of the things that I'm curious about is that the viscose doesn't really take up a lot of color. So I am really curious to see like if this will look heathered in the end, or what, if we'll end up staining it so it might be indistinguishable. Okay. So far, I mean, the water looks warm, but oh man, there's just so much color in here. We are getting more gray. Like, there is a really nice gradient that we have going on here, but I don't know about like another color. All right, here is what I am going to do. I'm going to put the whole thing in, move that end around a little bit, and grab my tongs because we are going to remove it and set it aside. I am not going to leave this in here for all of, I am not going to leave this in here for all of the color to absorb, but definitely I want a little bit more color on that tip. We've definitely added a lot of color here, but I'm now going to remove this and set it aside. All right, I've got here 100 grams of KnitPicks Swish DK, and let's see what's left. We are in, it's funny, it looks like there's a lot of pigment in here, but we are absolutely in a gray territory. And you can see that I'm going a little bit fast. There's not a lot of vinegar in here, but there's not like a ton of pigment left. That definitely looks reddish at the end. All right, I'm gonna put the whole thing in, and we are going to shimmer this around. I'm curious if that end will end up looking reddish at all. Let me change your position. Certainly, we did not have something dramatic happen here, like, for example, breaking Wilton's violet or breaking Wilton's black. I think the amount of red that is in this dye is really, really small compared to the amount of black. But we will come back in about 10 minutes and see what's going on in this pot. We absolutely have a gradient. I would say right now it looks like we've got black here and then we've got a gray at the other end. I am just sort of leaving this here right now so it can cool off completely and then we can wash it. But right now, and sometimes some of these blends, when they're wet, the colors look way more intense. It might feel less black once it dries. I know that some non-wool fibers get a little translucent when wet, or at least I guess that's my best guess because of the way the color looks way more vibrant when wet and is a lot softer once dry, because wool doesn't quite do that. Let's take a look. All right, actually, it looks like this water has cleared. This end definitely has some warmth to it. Oh, I guess we haven't quite cleared completely. There's still a little bit more in there. Let's go ahead and add a splash of vinegar just to sort of help things out. Another splash of vinegar. And yeah, we'll leave this in here to absorb the rest. I'm tempted. No, I'm gonna leave it. I was tempted to put the other skein back in, but I'm gonna turn off the heat and just leave this in here for maybe 20 minutes before I remove it so it can cool completely. We are back with 4 cups of water and 2 tablespoons of white vinegar into this steam pan. And now we're going to add 2 different types of yarn. First we have some Biggo in the color Dove Heather. This yarn is 50% superwash merino, 50% nylon, and as you can see it started off with a gray base. Next to it we will put some Swish Fingering weight yarn, which is 100% superwash wool. This is not merino, which I know was initially a shock to me when I first used it because I sort of associate Swish with the merino. I've dyed this one before, but not this one, so I'm excited to see how they come out. The water level feels a little low, so I have some more water that has the ratio 4 cups water, 2 tablespoons vinegar, and I guess I've added about 2 cups of that to this pan. And yeah, we're at a nice sort of like low-ish immersion, and I'm gonna start heating this up. And then we're gonna dye all of this yarn using just True Black and Silver Gray. I have no idea if the Silver Gray will show up on this Biggo yarn. Certainly the black will. But I'm just going to randomly sprinkle these colors on. There might be some white coming through, might not, but we're just going to have fun and play with the colors.
I am legitimately curious to see how this will go, given that black and gray are really 2 aspects of the same color. So like if you layer black on top of gray, it's not going to get more black. It might just get a little less gray. But let's just sort of see. Oh, I think I might want to go heavier. But we're just sort of, I have no idea if this is going to do anything on top of the Biggo. Ooh, yeah! Let's just go in and go for it. Ooh, am I even going to need the black? Huh. I hadn't thought too much about like how I wanted to go about this. Because I mean, I gotta say, in some of those areas, it's starting to feel a little black. And my plan is to come over like in a minute or so and sort of push it so we get some of that color spread. So, maybe I'm not going to use black at all. Maybe we're just going to go a little wild with this silver gray. All right, let's start sort of going in. Oh, and I guess maybe I needed more time for some of that speckling to go, but I'm starting to like tap it, allow some of these colors to spread. I can always come in with black later, and ooh, that's maybe what I should do. Be like heavy with the silver gray and come in with some black speckles after. Oh, I don't know. No matter what, we've definitely gotten some really cool coverage on here so far. There's a lot of dye, and maybe, goodness, interesting. It would be really cool if like we get some more like lighter gray on the rest of this. Okay, this has not been very long. I have not stopped filming yet, but I'm already flipping this over. And in part, because I want these colors to spread out a bit and sort of give us like a pale gray base instead of the white base. I want this color to sort of take over, which is a little harder to say how it'll do on our Biggo yarn, just because that is gray already. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm wondering how black that'll feel. That will be the real question. All right, let me dry off my hands. This is why it's sometimes worth it to really make things up as you go along. Interesting. And it shows, so like if I were to leave this, like the speckles don't happen instantaneously. Like there is a bit of time between when I add them and when they dissolve and strike completely on the yarn, which is really, really nice to know. Yeah, it is really nice to know that. And so I don't mind we end up with some speckles here. I just don't really want any true white left. I wanted this to be like a shades of black and gray, which maybe we didn't quite achieve, but we've got shades of charcoal and gray in this like random variegated way with some like soft speckles. Okay, we've pulled that out a bit. Let's pick it up and flip it over, because that's going to give us a sense of what the yarn is doing. And ooh, I mean, it is almost hard to tell. It's almost hard to tell that I started with a white base over here. There are some paler patches, but wow, this is something that ends up with that layered feel that I was going for, but we only used the one color.
So wet right now, this looks black. And what I don't know for sure, because you know these dyes don't have ingredients lists in the same way that like food coloring would, what I don't know is if silver gray is really just a more dilute form of, say, true black. So then if you have it really, really constant, like, do the speckles look the same? Like, certainly when we were speckling earlier, those weren't pale gray speckles. There was a lot more intensity that is really hard to distinguish from the true black speckles. But when dyed here, like, yeah, I think volume for volume, if we took a tablespoon of the black dye and a tablespoon of silver gray, there's no question which one would be more pigmented. But that doesn't mean that the individual particles themselves are less pigmented. It's just sort of like the summation of what is in that dye mixture. I am thrilled with how this looks. There's definitely, you can definitely tell that the colors are deeper here from that gray base, but I love this moodiness, this randomness that we have here. I'm now going to go ahead and let everything sit for 10 minutes. Then we'll come back and take a look and see if we might need to add anything else. It's really warm, but I am very, very happy with the coverage that I see. Yeah, I am just really, really digging this random colorway. And let's see how this one is. Yeah, I think that, you know, the coloration is absolutely random, but I think that we've got really good coverage. I am now going to turn off the heat completely, and I am going to remove these from the dye pan, set them in another pan to cool, and then we will wash these along with all the rest of our yarn. There's a lot of washing to do. We dyed a lot of yarn today, and yeah, lots of yarn dyeing means lots of yarn washing. Surprisingly, I'm not sure like what it is, but the base of this is almost feeling a little yellowish. Maybe I've just been staring at like too much black and gray. But it does not look like there is any color bleeding here. I'm going to add a little bit of clear dish soap. And yeah, this looks like all of our color is in the yarn. I will finish washing this and put it through my Nina Soft spin dryer and let it dry. I'm going to now speed up the washing of the remaining 4 skeins of yarn that I dyed in this video. If there's any significant bleeding or anything really noticeable, I'll come back and let you know about it. Alright, our dip dyed yarns are bleeding sort of this dirty brown color. I mean, at least I'm assuming that it's from the dye and not from like the Galileo yarn, but we do see a bit of warmth at the palest end of the swish, which I think is pretty cool. But I guess it looked like the water was pretty clear, but we'll keep washing. In this video, we dyed 5 different yarn bases using 3 colors: Dharma Silver Gray, Dharma Toner Black, and Dharma True Black. And I think that we learned a few things, such as True Black is a true black and doesn't look like that it'll break, whereas Toner Black definitely breaks. There's some red and yellow in there as well. And yeah, let's take a closer look at these yarns. On the KnitPicks Rustic Wool Fingering Base, which is a single ply, 100% superwash wool yarn, we see a lot of black looking speckles. I think that I can say conclusively that the silver gray speckles, while they might end up a little more spread out, are just as black as the true black. I'm pretty sure this is an end of true black, and then in the middle where there's fewer speckles, that is the silver gray. And then here at the end where we can see some red and yellow, that is the toner black. But in the silver gray section, I mean, you can see really defined dark speckles, and honestly, it doesn't look that different from what we see over in the black. Therefore, I can't say with any certainty that true black is just way more concentrated silver gray, but that's sort of what it feels like right here. And I think that if you want black speckles, if you want heavy black speckles, go for the true black. But maybe if you want them a little more spread out, try speckling with silver gray. You could cut it with some citric acid. And yeah, I think that that actually is a really, really good choice. I think that toner black probably has its great uses, but for speckling, maybe not, because you will probably end up with some red and yellow, unless that's what you're going for. Since the toner black does break when speckling, I wanted to explore whether or not it would break with dip dyeing. First, I dipped into the toner black some KnitPicks Galileo, which is 50% merino wool, 50% viscose from bamboo. There was a lot of dye there, so I finished it off with KnitPicks Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino. Now, Galileo is 50% viscose, which doesn't really dye with acid dyes. Therefore, we have this yarn that feels like a charcoal gray. It looked black while it was wet, but as soon as I took it out of my Nina Soft spin dryer, you could see that it was more of a gray. Let me bring it closer. In the close-up, you can see the heathered quality of this yarn. And that's because this is a dye that's only going to dye the wool content. I am very impressed with this overall color saturation we got here. This is a very nice saturated charcoal gray, but it's definitely not black. Since I didn't want this yarn to turn completely solid, I dipped the swish into the remaining color. And we have these grays, but what was left behind was kind of reddish. Is this broken where you see the colors absorb at different rates? I don't know. This color is more of a taupe versus a gray. Like one end is much cooler toned. This has some more warmth to it. Maybe it's broken. When I use this color later on some roving, I may have seen more breaking in that kind of situation. So ultimately, I'm still on the fence over whether or not this breaks in the way that I can break food coloring. But it is still a very, very pretty color. And so maybe I just wouldn't use it for speckling, but I'll use it for many other situations when I want to play with black. Finally, I wanted to play with layering gray and black. So I used KnitPicks Swish Fingering, which is 100% superwash wool, and KnitPicks Biggo, which started off as a Dove Heather colorway and is 50% superwash merino, 50% nylon. I dyed these yarns using the same technique in one pan, using only the silver gray acid dye. I considered layering the black and the silver gray, but when I looked closer at the first yarn I dyed, the speckles there were very similar in color. And so therefore, I'm not sure if I had tried like layering and speckling them on top of each other, if I would have seen any real difference between the two colors, except for locally when I dissolved it with the water. So therefore I added on these black speckles and splotches of color and then sort of moved it around in the water a bit so that way we could end up getting a gray base over the entire yarn. It is really fun to see that we got so many more speckles here on the Swish Fingering than we did on the Biggo. There's definitely some speckles here, but I think that overall the colors just struck a lot faster to the yarn that is 100% superwash wool. There we have it. Here are 5 skeins of yarn that we dyed using only black and gray acid dyes. We learned that Dharma True Black does not appear to break, even with speckling and letting it spread out. I'm really only seeing tones of black and gray, whereas the toner black dye definitely has some red and yellow pigments in there, and we did end up with some of those warm tones that seem to absorb a little slower. I also did, when we speckled with it, the reds did spread out more than the black speckles, which indicates also that it's absorbing a little bit slower. ChemKnits patrons, thank you so much for helping me meet a bunch of milestones this month, including the year anniversary of starting this Patreon. I truly appreciate all of the support that you have given me, And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you and the fiber patrons, including Ada Lai, Christina Doucette, and Karen Siegel for all of your support. You'll see names of some of the other fiber patrons going across your screen now. If you would like to join the Patreon family, you can find the links to the Patreon in the video description and iCard. Patrons get to vote for content and even sometimes decisions for the Dyepot PS series and others, and it's just a lot of fun. I had so much fun dyeing, well, I guess there's only 2 yarn bases I had never dyed before. And I have to say, when I first felt swish fingering, I was disappointed it wasn't merino, but it dyes like a dream. And I'm really, really excited about it. The Rustic Wool fingering, I already knew I liked that from the moment I touched it, but I really appreciate having access to this superwash single ply yarn. If you would like to learn more about any of these KnitPicks yarn bases or any of the other materials that I use in this video, including the Nina Soft Spin Dryer, which is amazing for drying the yarn, you can find affiliate links in the video description. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, and whenever you love a video, give it that thumbs up, and maybe even share it with your friends. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.